Hello everyone, it's Smypants Chess here once again with another CCC11 finals game between Leela and Stockfish. So sorry I've not been posting recently, I just need a bit of a break. But now we're back and we're in the reverse fixture with Leela as white here and Stockfish as black, because the opening was d4 knight f6, c4 knight c6, knight c3 and now e5. This is the black knight's tango once again. But now both sides have switched round, and in the previous game Stockfish also played d5 like Leela did, but in this position as black, Leela actually played knight to e7, which is the main line, but Stockfish opted for something different. They played knight to b8, so going backwards and probably going to reroute the knight to a different square, maybe via knight to a6 perhaps to c5, which makes some sense. Play continued, knight to f3 by Leela attacking the pawn gets pushed up attacking the knight, and the white knight jumps into d4. Black plays bishop to b4, so preparing bishop takes c3 and doubling white's pawns on the c-file. Leela protects a knight with queen to b3 and attacks the bishop at the same time. a5 is played and now a3, the bishop takes on c3 and the queen recaptures. So all in all, this is quite decent play from both sides, but again it seems as though white has the slight edge with the leading development and two centred pawns. Black played d6, developing their bishop, and now actually Leela played an incredibly interesting move. She played the move rook to g1. Now this is a very entertaining and interesting idea. Just going to launch the g-pawn up the board. Now I'm not a grandmaster, but this looks like a really unusual move to me. Maybe it's standard practice in grandmaster and top level games, but I've never seen anything like this. So it's just rather interesting for me anyway. Black continued with knight b to d7. And now Leela just launches the pawn, g4, preparing g5, and amazingly Stockfish just castles right into it, not scared at all. So Leela leaves the pawn on g4 for now. I checked with g5 here. If g5, black can play knight h5, and if queen h3 there's g6 to protect the knight, and Leela could play knight to f5. The point is, if the g-pawn takes the knights then the queen will take on h5, but after knight to e5, knight h6 with check, king h8, queen c3 and f6, h4. It's a very interesting position with white attacking and black defending their king. But to my naked eye anyway, it seems as though black has this quite under control. And in this position actually black should play just move c6 and takes, and we have quite a relatively even game where white has a slight edge. I was looking at this move though, f5. However, then white can actually play bishop to e3, and now actually white has an amazing attack with bishop to d4 to come. So yeah, black does have to be careful. So after black castled then, Leela instead played bishop to e3 rather than advance the pawn. Black played knight to e5, attacking the g-pawn 3 times, and white defends with f3 to protect the pawn. An exchange occurs and black plays rook to e8 because now the bishop could be pinned on the e-file. White of course just castles queenside to sidestep this. b5 is played by Stockfish. The point is the knight can't take on b5 because it protects the f3 pawn, and if c takes b5 then knight takes d5, which would be very nice for black. So actually this b5 move is really good. For instance, again knight takes b5, knight takes f3. So this b5 pawn can't be taken. So this is a very surprising move actually. Leela carries on though with g5 attacking the knight, but Stockfish continues with b4, so a counter-attack attacking the queen, which retreats to d2, and the knight retreats to d7, and Leela plays f4 attacking the knight on e5, but now Stockfish jumps in with knight to c5, so sacrifices the knight temporarily, as we'll see. F takes e5, d takes e5. Knight c6 attacks the queen on d8, but first black plays knight b3 with check. King c2 is mandatory because otherwise black can take the queen with check, so knight takes d2, knight takes the queen, knight takes f1, rook takes f1, and very importantly here Stockfish actually played b3 with check. If rook takes d8 then a takes b4, a takes b4, king b3. And after a few more moves, let's say bishop h3, rook e1, rook a6 and bishop c5, white will win another pawn. First of all, Stockfish actually plays b3 with check here. I think if white takes this pawn, then black will play a4 with check, king c3, rook takes d8. The point is that this a4 pawn is a bit of a thorn in white's side because it really limits this b pawn. So after b3 with check, Leela actually played king to c3, and now rook takes d8 was played, and Leela continued with bishop to c5. I was looking at a4 for black here, but I think white gained an advantage with rook to f3 after bishop d7, rook e1 attacking the pawn, rook e8, rook f1 to attack the f7 pawn, c6, rook takes f7. There's no other way to protect this pawn. Bishop h3, rook to f2, takes, and rook ac8, king b4. And it's very clear that white now has a good advantage. We've got a passed pawn, and probably going to hoover up these two other pawns at some point as well. And they've got an immensely powerful doubled rook on the f-file. But back in the game, rook e8 was played rather than a4. But so now Leela does actually play a4 themselves to stop black from playing a4. And white can now take this b3 pawn at the leisure at some point, unless black plays rook to b8 obviously. Stockfish played c6. Obviously, I think if white takes this pawn off, it's actually quite bad for them, because then I think black may be able to play moves like bishop to e6 and eventually play rook to c8 and start hoovering up all these pawns on the c file. So instead of taking, Leela pushed on with d6. This just puts more pressure on black. Black played rook to b8 to protect the b3 pawn. Rook f3 is played. Rook to b7 and rook to e1. Now I forgot to count the pawns here. It's actually black's got an extra pawn in this position. However, white definitely has the more active pieces. Stockfish continued with h6. There was an exchange. Rook g1 was played with check. The king has to go to the h file. If it goes to the f8 square, then a move like d7 would be catastrophic for black. So king h7 and rook f6 is played. Stockfish plays rook to e6, and Leela comes up with the cunning d7 here, threatening to play rook takes f7. If bishop takes d7, then rook takes f7 can be played, king h8, rook f8, king h7, rook f7, king h8 and rook g to g7, and trying to hoover up this bishop. And obviously if black takes on f6, then would come d8 and get a queen for white. So in the game, rook takes d7 had to be played. White continued with rook takes e6, f takes e6, and Leela played rook to e1 to attack the pawn on e5. Bishop b6 was definitely a possibility here, attacking the a5 pawn. Play may have continued e4, bishop takes a5, rook d3, king b4 and h5. King c5 and then e3, bishop c3. And I think white could maybe win this game by pushing this a pawn up the board, but it's very tricky. So maybe Leela played it a bit simpler. She played rook e1, attacking the pawn on e5. Black played rook to f7, rook takes e5 was played, rook f3, and then blocks with rook to e3. Now it's hard to say what would happen if they both captured rooks here, but it seems though I think white would win the game, because then black can lose the pawn on a5 to bishop b6, and the pawn on b3 will easily fall to white as well. So perhaps for this reason, Stockfish continued with rook to f5. Bishop b6 attacks the a5 pawn, king g6, and then Leela hoovers up the pawn on b3 finally, and now we have equal pawns. King f7, king a3, rook h5 attacking the pawn on h2, and b3. I think if rook takes h2, then white will just hit this pawn on a5 and take that one off instead, so it's just a trade. Bishop d7 is played, rook g3, and now there's quite a lot of manoeuvring to go on. So there's a lot of bishop moves and rook moves that the computers like to do to get the ideal setup. So I'm going to speed through these because I don't really think there's much to learn until we get to okay, so they started pushing the pawns up. So here let's just go back. King a3 was played, e5 and rook e3. So trying to attack the e5 pawn, stop it from promoting down the board. And c5 was played interestingly by Stockfish. So now it just seems to me that white's just hoovering up all these pawns. Bishop takes a5 is played. The bishop goes to c6. bishop d2, king e6. But now white has a passed a pawn. Rook e1, bishop f3 and bishop e3, so attacking the pawn on c5. There's king d6 to protect it, and now a5, trying to promote his pawn up the board. Stockfish went rook f6, and now a6, king c7, a7, and king to b6. So black's got very good chances here to stop this a pawn because the bishop just covers all these white diagonal squares. So Leela continued, king to b2, the king takes on a7, but this allows bishop takes c5 with check. The king goes to b7 and Leela hoovers up another pawn on e5. Now she's got a 2-pawn advantage, which is probably sufficient to win this game actually. Rook f4, bishop e7 to protect the pawn, and bishop c6. Again, I think this is a strange move because now rook takes h5 is just played, Leela picks up another pawn. It seems as though Stockfish has just given up. Computers sometimes do this as well to give themselves a sort of an ideal position. Maybe Stockfish just realises they're going to lose, but allowing the rook to take on h5 allows black to lose slower than it would do. So play continued, rook f2, king a3, and I'll speed through some of these moves actually because this is now quite an easy technique to win this game, especially with these 2 passed pawns for white. So obviously black's got behind the pawns, but it's just an easy win for white just to push these pawns up the board. And white should have no problems. So after a few more moves, the rook and the bishop manoeuvre around, and Leela starts launching this a pawn at the board, and finally we've got to b7 and we get the queen, and then the rook takes it, and Leela does this thing where she likes to get rid of all the pieces before doing a king and rook checkmate. So this was a very nicely played game by Leela. It kind of confused me though because Stockfish sort of just had weak pawns and eventually just gave them up in the middle to end game relatively easily, and Leela just took advantage of this. I think this game was again a reflection of the terrible opening by black. It just shows at this highest level that you can't play these subpar openings, and both sides have lost with black with this game. So it's good to get some decisive results, but I think a more even opening would have got a more interesting game, in my opinion. But anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you haven't already, drop me a like, comment or subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and I'll see you next time.